wholeness comes from the inside out.
When we're living congruently with our values, there's happiness because there is that sense of wholeness.
Wholeness is when the way of your being matches the truth of your being.
These next few podcasts are an attempt to talk a little bit about my theory of the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, and how they communicate within the physical sensations we experience. In early 2021, I took each body and focused on it for the whole month in my video library at michellewingle.com/thrive-free. There's a lot more there, and you can access all of that for free. I'll put a link in the notes. And I've included a movie review for each body to help teach principles kind of in a fun way. So that's kind of fun, but spoiler alert. I wanted to have these ideas in place as I begin a new batch of podcasts based on different modalities within holistic or wellness practices. I have found the distinction between our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical experiences to be useful in finding a modality that is right for you. Our beings need spiritual nourishment. Spiritual can be a triggering word for some, and that is a result of all of us putting our mental, emotional, and physical parameters around something that is eternal and expansive. It's indescribable. I heard Carolyn Myss say that, quote, "Our spirit is the part of us that is drawn toward hope." Keep this in mind as I talk to you today about the spiritual body. You might miss the spiritual aspects of what I'm saying if you don't. We make spiritual things big and grand and magnificent and great. But if we really are spiritual beings having a human experience, then the spiritual is the everyday simple things. The illness can be spiritual. The job loss can be spiritual. The heartache can be spiritual. These things are made less painful through connection, which connection is the spiritual body's purpose. It wants to be connected to others, and it also holds the meaning that we have about the world and our experience. This meaning is a little different from our opinions. This meaning shapes us, and it gives us meaning. The spiritual body experiences life through connection and meaning. These are not sensations. They are not mental thoughts or beliefs. They are not emotions or states of being. When we talk about connection and meaning, we are in the realm of higher things, beyond physical, into spiritual things, beyond even vocabulary that we can all agree upon as to what they mean. The value of this connection and meaning gets lost when we are in mental, emotional, or physical pain. We might use different pain relievers to disconnect from our pain. Disconnection temporarily feels better, but it cuts off from that spiritual part of us, the part that's connecting, the part that is connection. We are not whole when we disconnect, and as a result of this, every part of us, even if it's subconscious, knows we are not whole, and we feel it. We are quick to address our physical pain. When we get a cut or a burn, we work to stop the pain. We might have frustration with the object that caused the pain. If we stub our toe on the chair, we might have emotions toward that chair for a minute. The same for the knife that cuts or the hot stove that burns. We might show some anger, but we don't linger on the object in order to stop the pain. We actually go and access tools, a Band-Aid, some burn cream, etc. When it comes to emotional pain or mental pain or spiritual pain, we tend to focus on the present moment source of that pain. The present moment pain is like bumping the bruise. It hurts, but the bruise is there because of a past wound. It is important to correctly understand where the pain is coming from. If we kept getting burned every time we worked at the stove, maybe it's time to investigate if there's a problem with the stove or if there's a problem with how we're interacting with it. It can seem that mental, emotional, and spiritual pain might not have a source that we can easily identify, but doing the work to find it is really important, and sometimes the pain doesn't come from what happened, but from what didn't happen. You could say we are dealing with the spirit of the wound. its physical or tangible evidence doesn't exist. More often than not, we use pain relievers, in quotes, to mask the pain instead of using available tools to heal the pain. Distraction, which is a form of disconnection, is a huge pain reliever we often use. We may distract ourselves with positive things. We may feel like a distraction is a good thing. Watch out for phrases like, I just need to. Those are good signals that we are using a pain reliever. I just need to get this done and then I can be okay. Maybe we're not okay. We need to stop for a minute and analyze and observe what's really, really happening. Or we may perfect parts of our lives, which is another way of disconnecting from the real us. We might think that if it looks good on the outside, then we don't have to look at it. Or another way we disconnect is that we may be critical, or we might gossip, and of course we may use substances as a pain reliever. Food is one of the most common of these substances, and if this is your particular pain reliever and it resonates with you, please go and take the class 8-week Rate Release at michellewingle.com/classes. This class is geared toward the idea of seeing and healing the pain behind the weight. It's not your normal weight loss class, and it's not meant to be. But back to the spiritual body. Beautiful rituals and ceremonies feed the connection and meaning aspects of the spiritual body. This is where religion has done well to feed this part of it and why they've kind of overlapped. And we need to find ways to create them in all the parts of our lives. We need to see them as necessary, whether in religion or not. Rituals and ceremonies have a way of symbolically saying things and moving into that experience of the wordless in a way that feeds this part of us. Again, it's been tricky. Faith has been a difficult thing for people in modern times, the last decade or so here in the U.S. So I wanted to take some time to shed some light on this subject because it's closely related to this spiritual part of ourselves and is a block to us being able to experience our spiritual body because we cut it off because of this idea. And I was actually introduced to this model, the stages of faith, by my own therapist. And there are different kind of stages we experience or that have been laid out for us. There's the hero's journey, there's the fairy tale, there's the stages of grief, we have our stages of life, there's stages of growth. These are kind of these ways of theorizing the different levels we go through. And it makes sense that there's one for an awakening or growing into faith. It's not just a one-time thing. We are not built that way in any other area, so it makes sense, right? This has been a difficult topic for so many people because as we kind of maneuver between religion and faith and spirituality and faith, it kind of gets messy, but I would just say that both hold an opportunity for faith to exist. It's important to say that when we talk about the stages of faith and when we talk about the word faith, we note that this is different from knowing and that it's not necessarily about faith as a certain type of beliefs. This is faith as in trust. It's not a knowing. The opposite of faith, you've heard a million times, is not doubt, but certainty, as they say. The need for certainty is probably the biggest barrier for faith. We want to know that our version is right, and we like to be with people that confirm our confirmation bias. And I hope we can set that aside for a while and make room for all stages of faith. Not really an emotion. I don't know if it's really a state of mind, or a state of being in the emotion. I don't know if it's a thought system. It's this peace, this faith that belongs in this emotion, in this spiritual body, exists there. The spiritual body understands it, where it's not really an emotion, like I say. It's not really a set of beliefs or thoughts. It's this trust. I created this graphic that I have available for you to download in the notes, and it's inspired by the work of Dr. James Fowler. You can read more about Dr. Fowler's version of his stages of faith in The Psychology of Human Development and Quest for Meaning. He published this work, and he's been quoted and referenced 1,000 times by a million different people. Paying attention to my graphic, I loved this quote by Alfred North Whitehead. He wrote, "Religion is the transition from God the void to God the enemy, and from God the enemy to God the companion." Such a great quote. Only with the death of our previous image can a new and more adequate one arise. Each stage of faith is necessary and beautiful. Each takes courage to abide in and to leave behind. The very faith created in each stage is the faith needed to progress out of it. As we honor our own stage and the stage of others, we can experience oneness or wholeness within all of them. So, very similar, almost identical to Dr. Fowler's stages of faith, we begin at stage 1. And stage 1 is commonly called the preschool stage. This is where fantasy or reality intermix. Our most basic ideas about God and our faith story are picked up from parents and or society through one-word ideas and simple explanations, like picture the little baby pointing to a picture of Jesus and it says Jesus, and it's just, that's what it is. It's simple. There's no complexity to it. It's just an introduction, stage 1. We begin in stage 2, understanding the world more logically. We relate to the stories told by our belief system. We relate to them literally. We may view faith as magical or God as a kind of genie granting wishes only to the obedient. Good and bad are very polarized here, and some adults stay here, and they choose to live out their lives in this state where we are very black and white. But if we can move on to stage 3, we usually adopt the beliefs we are taught through spiritual experiences. We interact with them and have our own experience. We accept our belief system as the only truth, often inside a box, very much us versus them. At this stage, authority or power is placed heavily in the leaders and mentors of someone's faith or faith story. So most of these stages are a lot about the faith story, not about the experience of faith, the experience of trust in the universe or in God or in ourselves, right? Before we kind of move on, what I found is most of the time at this point, what pushes us to the next stage a lot of times is heartache, is what I call it. And heartache can come in many forms. It is a life challenge or a wound that seems to arrive perpendicular to what was or is expected. Heartache is a catalyst to move forward if we choose, or if we identify as our heartache, it can halt us from moving forward. Courage and compassion are equally critical here. We do need courage to push ourselves beyond it, but we also need exactly the same amount of compassion to realize that it's hard to do, or especially looking at other people, have that compassion that it's not just about courage. We need the compassion. And I learned kind of this lesson, this visual I was given by William Paul Young, the writer of the book, The Shack. And he came and talked at the event that we had for the Wholeness Network, and I was driving him to his hotel, and he just described this most profound idea that really represents this heartache stage and the symbol that is special to him. And he says, you're going through life and it's like you're going upwards, you're in this vertical growth, and then all of a sudden something crosses over that's perpendicular, that just cuts you off. And when you move beyond it, you're a different person, and that's the symbol of the cross. That's what was special to him. That's what that represents to him, is this idea of this heartache and that crossroad in the middle where your heart, or where the heart sits, is a really beautiful symbolism that he taught me. If we can move past our heartache, if we give ourselves enough courage and compassion, then we move on to stage 4. And sometimes we're still in pain at this point, because in stage 4, maybe we see the boxes that we have created or that were created for us, and we start to think critically of them. We start to maybe examine them, and we might be upset by them. And we start to contrast our beliefs with other beliefs and start to say, hey, what's happening there? And it starts to kind of fall apart a little bit. Feelings of disillusion may arise and cause us to get stuck here. And it's not helpful that stage 3 people, very many people remain in stage 3. Stage 3 may judge stage 4 as fallen. They think that they have gone away from faith when actually they've moved forward and progressed in faith. And now we're starting to undo what's been done and move into like this, instead of faith being something outside of us, we're now starting to figure out what it means inside. And when we've gone through the struggle and when those disillusionment gets resolved and that critical introspection subsides, we move into stage 5. And in stage 5, the fight for certainty ends. So we're no longer going to just need an answer. We become okay with not an answer. It's quite the transformation. And we see and we accept life's paradoxes. We accept two things existing that are opposites in the same place. And I don't know if stage 2 even sees it. It just doesn't even, it goes over their head. We often return at this point to our original stories, our symbols, and the practices that we are familiar with, because the judgment is now different. It doesn't exist anymore. That we've moved into this different state of being. We no longer need to be right or wrong. There's no longer true or not true. We're just suspended. We're beginning to just be suspended in faith. We move to these original stories and symbols, but we have our own authority. We're no longer, we kind of put ourselves at equal with authority figures and let ourselves make decisions within ourselves. And we get personal answers for ourselves and for our own life. And then there's stage 6. And few people reach this stage, and those who do live their lives in peace and in the service of others without any real worries. They accept their own divinity and the divinity in everyone else and within everything. This can be called enlightenment, conversion, or grace. In this stage 6, we don't give away what we don't have, and we have a sense of the real life peace and contentment in ourselves and with others. There are a few people that I can think of that really have this. They just don't seem to get upset about things. I think of an aged couple sitting on the front porch and they're rocking their chairs and they've just been through everything in their lives. They've been through famine. They've been through wealth. They've been through sickness. They've been through everything. And so the things that come don't really rattle them anymore. And in one way, you could say it's sad because they've just gotten used to the roller coaster. It doesn't seem to jolt them anymore. But it's also beautiful because they accept. They've earned that right to just accept. They have been up and they have been down. They know that the ups are not as big as we anticipate them to be or want them to be. And those downs, they don't take us down as much as we imagine them to. And so they just sit in this place of calm. It's like that grandpa or grandma who you come to with some big problem and they just don't seem to jump in with all the stress about it. They don't seem to get excited in their emotions. They just listen and know it's going to be okay. And you're kind of like, yeah, but, and you just don't rock them. You just don't shake them. That's a stage 6 person. It's almost like that faith is just, it's not expressive anymore. It's just this inner calmness. It's not trying to win at anything, or it's not trying to prove anything. It's just the way that they are. Their spiritual body has just accepted this unknowingness. And it's just beautiful. I don't know if we're going through these stages numerically. I wonder if different parts of our lives go through these stages, even though it's called stages of faith. I think we confront faith in ourselves, faith in our abilities, faith in a loving God or universe, and faith in love. All of these might go through this process. I think this process, that's why it's more than just a religious one. It's faith and trust in it by itself. What is our faith story about love? And we believe it's fairy tale at the beginning, right? And then we have heartache. And then we kind of criticize our love. We wonder if we've done the right thing. We want to get out. But pretty soon, if we can push to stage 5, we move back to that original story. And there's just more calm about it. We accept that uncertainty. And then like those beautiful couple, the grandpa and grandpa, they move into this faith and love between each other. They no longer have to try, right? They're not putting their energies and efforts at trying to earn the love from the other person. They both just accept it. They accept that they are loved, and they accept that they love the other person. So that's why I think these stages, the stage of faith, it's so important. And even though the wording sometimes is talking about faith, to me it's a bigger, when it comes to the spiritual body, it's a bigger and more complex layers of understanding faith or trust in ourselves and in the world and how things run. I think it's a journey, and I think it's good to have a journey. When I think of a journey, I think of learning something, growing in a way, getting to the end of the journey a different person than I was at the beginning. The spiritual body loves faith, that kind of faith I described, and your spiritual body does not like a box very much, maybe unless you're in the stage 3. But the essence of who we are is we think big, we are expansive, we're grand. Expanding faith or trust is the only thing that feels comfortable, really, because there's never an end to its growth, and expansion is not tied up in a little box, and that spiritual part of us is that expansion. There are things that I experienced as a young child that I didn't know were very special. I didn't know that it was unique, but I have these moments that I remember, and they've become sacred to me, and I'm going to share one with you. It's simple. It might not sound special to you at all, but it was so enlightening to me. And if I had vocabulary enough, I could maybe just begin to describe what it changed for me. So I'll try. I was probably 10 or so, maybe younger. I know I wasn't driving yet, but I remember having this download of information, and it was like all that I would learn here in this life was represented to me as a square. And I was shown that when I would leave this life or this stage, and as I would progress and I would have more knowledge, then it would look like a cube. And what that meant was that it would be familiar. It wouldn't be something I'd never thought of before. It would be familiar, but it would have a lot more depth to it. I would have a shift in perception or perspective, and then all of a sudden this square would be a cube. A cube has a square, it's familiar, but I understood that I couldn't possibly understand that cube within my physical life, that square was good enough for that stage, for this stage, right? Then as an adult, I was pondering that one day, or I don't know, but that came up again. And it's really strange, but I kind of realized all of a sudden that cube, it shifted a little bit, and each side of that cube was in some way its own shape, its own 3-dimensional image on each side. And then I looked inside what made up that cube and the atoms and molecules and how they had their own three-dimensional shapes. And the whole thing shifted again. All of these different versions of three-dimensional things are important. All of them are needed to make up the whole. All of them are a reflection of the whole, but they are not the whole. And so they are both it and part of it. I saw a fractal. I don't know if you know what fractals are, but look them up. They're fascinating. We are in a stage of growth, of faith, you might say, and it is good. But it's just the stage we are at. And soon a new stage will come and it will expand and be totally different. But that first stage, with the stage that we are now, is enough. Our physical lives, the tangible parts, the functional parts, are like the square. Our spiritual lives are the parts that connect off the square in a million directions. Instead of a movie review for the spiritual body, because a movie begins and ends, the experience of the spiritual body is more connected to the experience of awe and wonder. It's like looking at those pieces of art, whether music or painting or sculpture, poetry, whether that's looking at the sky or just following an ant carrying its food back to its home. These moments where we feel connected to something bigger than ourselves are what gives our life meaning, where our life feels full of meaning. So go try that. Have an experience of awe and wonder. We invite you to the wholenessnetwork.com, where you'll find the Wholeness Library. Inside, you'll find tutorials, downloads, mini classes, and all sorts of streaming content for you on your wholeness journey.